Hello CIH Futures, here I am at last, I think. Very nervous, not entirely sure I'm happy to be here yet, but I'm sure that the nerves will fall away as we go on. So thank you so much, Cheryl Tracy, for inviting me to be part of the Human Library that CIH Futures are putting together. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, standing on the shoulders of giants of the housing world who've done it before me. What I've been asked to do is give you a little bit of history about my career journey, which I tell you now has been up, down and sideways, so perhaps a little bit different to the usual route that people take. A little bit about the story of homes in Sedgemoor since I arrived here nearly 2.5 years ago, and then a few little hints and tips that might be useful to people going into the future. Hello to the people who are saying hello, thank you. So if I start with a little bit about myself, 55 years old, but we won't talk about that, nearly 56, never mind. My housing journey really started when I was tiny, and I lived with my grandparents because my mum and dad split up when I was 6 months old, and I lived with them up in Fleetwood in a council house. And I know I've got rose-tinted spectacles a little bit, but it was a fantastic experience. I was living with my grandma and granddad. Everybody's back doors were open, everybody's front doors were open, and we all kind of got on with it and got on with each other. I moved back in with my mum when she met my stepdad, and we moved to a little place called Aldridge. My dad worked away from home a lot, and when I was about 12, I saw a play for today called Cathy Come Home. And I know that this has been mentioned before, but it was a bit of a game changer for me. It sort of set me on a path which is where I am now. What I found myself doing, and it was only when I was reflecting last night and today on what I was going to say today, is that I would lie in bed at night after that event drawing model towns. Now, nobody would want to live in one of my model towns, to be honest, because they were very linear and they all had a little shop and a pub at the end of each street. So very idyllic, but interesting that it was happening to me as early as 12, 13 years old. I'll tell you what my careers advice was when I was at school. When I was in the 5th form, as it used to be then, I was doing GCSEs and I was still working quite hard at that point. I filled in a careers questionnaire, and what came back was that I should be a fitness instructor in the RAF. Anybody who knows me will know that fitness instructor, RAF, really not my thing. So don't always listen to other people's careers advice. I did my A-levels. I was never there. I was off with my partner, to be perfectly honest, so I didn't spend an awful lot of time at school. When I'd done my A-level exams, I went off travelling for 3 months. I did get my A-levels by some bloody miracle. I don't know how that happened, really. Came back from my travelling, had a huge row with my stepfather, moved in with my partner, didn't go to university. Decided I needed to get a job, had 2 job interviews on the same day and got offered both of them. This was 1980, let's be honest. And I took a job as a repairs clerk at Walsall Council, which had over 30,000 homes, and my job was to sit on a reception desk in the main reception of Walsall Council from 9 a.m. in the morning until 5 p.m. at night, taking repairs. And I saw all of life there. I saw all sorts of people, met some fabulous people, both who worked for Walsall Council and who came through the door, and met some not so fab people, which at 18 was a real grower-upper, I guess. I did that for 4 months, and then what was happening in Walsall, interestingly, was what they called a devolution revolution. There was a council in power at that time that decided to set up the first neighbourhood offices in the United Kingdom, and I was really fortunate to work in one of the very first ones of those. And I did that for several years and worked my way up the ranks while I was there, getting my first sort of junior management job. Probably I was about 25, I think. After about 8 years in the neighbourhood offices, it was getting to be a little bit same old for me, and I couldn't see where I could make much of a difference. So a job was advertised helping to set up a welfare rights unit at the council, and so off I went and I did that. And that was all about take-up of benefits, and I also was really lucky in that I was taught how to train and to present, and I became quite an advocate for people in difficulty, whether that was colleagues through some trade union activities, or whether it was customers, tenants. Having done a few years at the Welfare Rights Unit, I met my second husband, who I met through my trade union activities. He now refers to me as the poacher turned gamekeeper for reasons that will become apparent when you realise I'm a CEO. I worked in a tenant management organisation, and that was where really I learnt my trade, to be honest, because it was working directly for tenants and with tenants who formed the management board, and it was the biggest learning of my life because you did everything from double entry bookkeeping, which please don't ask me to do it now, I don't think I'd manage it, right through to going and checking repairs and taking rents and doing benefits advice and homelessness advice. Every single thing you can imagine related to housing management I did during my period at the tenant management organisation. And I'm hugely proud of the work that we did there because we genuinely created a community that was cradle to grave. After I'd been at that tenant management organisation a good while, I decided to leave Walsall because I'd been there for a long time, and I think it's important to move on and see different things. So I went to work for an estate management board, another kind of tenant management organisation over in Birmingham, Priority Estates project, one called Bloomsbury. And while I was there, I had my fourth son, because I've got my 4 boys and 2 granddaughters, and an honorary one, which I'll come to. After I'd been at the estate management board a couple of years, the tenant management organisation I'd worked on in Walsall decided with 7 other tenant management organisations across the Walsall area that they wanted to become a housing association. And they didn't want to join the large-scale voluntary transfer that was going on in Walsall to Walsall Housing Group. They decided they wanted to remain independent and do their own thing. And so they formed an organisation called WATMOS, Walsall Alliance of Tenant Management Organisations, and I applied for and became the project manager for that transfer. Fascinating stuff, because a transfer like it had never been done before, where we were looking at a governance model which had 8 tenants and 4 independents on the board. So fantastic. And it was great. That was my first LSVT, and I worked there for several years as the operations director. Then I made the only decision I've ever made, which was head over heart really, and decided to go and work for a traditional housing association that had just been through a merger. And I didn't like it, and I didn't fit the culture, and the culture didn't fit me. So I was there for 9 months, including working 3 months' notice. And it had been, in terms of money, it had been an upward step to go there. But in terms of responsibility and title, it was a downward move. But it seemed like the right thing to do. It wasn't. Follow your heart. From there, after the 9 months, I moved on to my second large-scale voluntary transfer. I've done 3. I should have loony tattooed across my forehead, really. And I worked there in North Shropshire for, again, about 3 years until the big job came up, which was my third large-scale voluntary transfer over in Wales. And I went and project managed that and then became chief exec there. About 5 years into that transfer, my husband was diagnosed with bowel cancer, and the world kind of shifted on its axis, to be honest, because things that had been important before became singularly unimportant, to be honest, and I stopped working, parted company with Ty Callon and looked after Bry, my husband, who is now absolutely fine, which is great, and you can only kind of sort your CDs into alphabetical order so many times, and I get bored very easily, and so I started looking around for a job. I didn't want to be a chief exec, so I looked for director level roles, and a job came up at Homes in Sedgemoor as the director of neighbourhoods. I applied for it and I got it, which was great, and I thought, steady organisation, maybe some room for improvement, but it'll be an easing back into the world of housing. So I rocked up here on the 1st of September 2015, and in my third day, most of the board and the rest of the executive team resigned. So that was a bit of a shocker, to be honest, and it was all a little bit chaotic for the almost 70 colleagues that I had in the business. So I had to make a decision. I decided I was going to stay, which was great. It's all about the people, I think, is the biggest message that I can give, because where the organisation was 2.5 years ago, it wasn't in a great place. Obviously, with all those people walking out, it felt very unstable. It felt a little bit repressed. Nobody wanted to make decisions. I was being asked some really quite bonkers questions about whether it was okay to do things. And I had to do something quite quickly to settle the ship, steady the ship. Yeah, settle the stomachs and steady the ship. And what I did was I spent 15 minutes with every single person who worked here, all 70 colleagues, to ask them 3 things they loved about their job, 3 things we could do better as an organisation and how, and something I couldn't possibly know about them. And that's something that gave me a real flavour for what people loved about being here, and then what people felt we could do, and importantly, how we could improve things. And I've done that 3 times now in the 2.5 years I've been here. So once a year I sit down with every single person, we have a cup of coffee, and I ask them these questions. And I've learnt so much about the people here, who are just the best team overall I've ever worked with. Sorry to everybody else I've ever worked with, but they really are. They're a fantastic group of people. And it's given me the opportunity to very regularly at our colleague briefings go back and say, this is what you said to me and this is what I've done about it, or this is what my colleagues have done about it, and also to ask people, what are you going to do about it and how are you going to help to improve the service. It's all about the people, Gabby. Absolutely. It's absolutely all about the people. That's what it is. But we've done lots of other things as well here to bring people along in the culture that we wanted, which is, whereas it was a very silent place when I arrived, now you will hear laughter, you will hear people talking to each other, you will see people stand up and go and talk to other people in the business, which really didn't happen that much, I'm afraid. So we've introduced things like what we call Tufties, which is TY. FFTY, thank you for the thank you. So if a customer contacts us and says, thanks, so-and-so did a really good job, I write to that customer to thank them for thanking us, hence thank you for the thank you. And the colleague who's been thanked gets a letter to their home address from me, just telling them that they're absolutely marvellous, with our usual hashtag of GoTeamHis all over it, of course. And then at our colleague conference, I don't know how many people watching are old enough to remember Tufty, the little Rosper squirrel, but what people get there is a little plush squirrel as a kind of thank you again. We do all sorts of other things. We do stuff around birthday cards. Everybody gets a birthday card from me, hand selected, and I try to match the personalities as far as it's possible to do so. And we do things, the usual stuff around Made a Difference awards. We all go out for a meal together at Christmas, and we've become, it's very much like a big family here, I would say, and that means, you know, we have our moments, but generally it's just a fabulous place to work, and I couldn't recommend it highly enough to people. In terms of how I've come up with the ideas I have and how we decide what's going to work within homes in Sedgemoor. Over 37 years of working in housing, I've gathered up a very, very big toolkit. And basically, it's like a great big treasure chest. And when something's going on or we're brainstorming how are we going to make this work, we open the lid of the treasure chest and we have a good rummage about inside to see what we think. Either something we've nicked off somebody else, or a new idea that we've had, or something that's worked elsewhere. And we'll pull that out and we'll have a look at it and see, do we think this is going to work here? We give it a go. But we also, because it's all about the people, we dare people to fail. We say to people, give it a go. What's the worst thing that can happen? So when people come up with an idea here and they'll say to me, I'm thinking about doing this, what do you think? I use the Sumo Method, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is nothing will change and 10 is somebody will die. Where on that scale do you think this idea, this innovation, this new thing you want to do sits? And so long as it's below about a 6, I just say, well, go and get on with it then, give it a try. And we just try to ensure that we always come at these things from the customer point of view. We've done a lot of stuff around lean here at Homes in Sedgemoor, and we're now launching we have launched a very big IT project, but I think we've done it the right way around, because we've done lean before we've done the IT, and I think that's been a real learning point for me, because in other organisations where perhaps I haven't had quite so much control because I haven't been in charge, I've seen IT being the tail that wags the dog. And here we've definitely got it the right way round. So we're looking at all our processes and we are telling our IT system what we want it to do. Advice and tips, shall I move on to that? I've got a little list here, so I'm kind of going to read it and give you extras. Surround yourself with people who help you shine and then hang on to them. Absolutely do that. Run away from negative people. Thank you, Liam O'Connell, who used to be my coach, for telling me that. I had a tendency at one time to hang on to everybody because everybody matters. Yes, they do. But people who are undermining you are absolutely no good for you. Keep away from them. Just don't let them into your life. If you're not happy, get out. Don't try to hang on to something when you know it's not going well and you know it's not right for you. Get out of there. Be authentic. Don't ever try and be somebody that you're not. I was once in a situation where I thought the best thing to do was to try to be the person that this other person wanted me to be. It worked very badly for me. I was incredibly miserable and I didn't do as good a job as I should have been doing. So don't try and be someone you're not. Adjust behaviours, be agile, be adaptable, but what you can't do is just be somebody else, leopards and spots and all that. Best advice I've ever been given was one of the things that they suggested I tell you. My mum died 20 years ago and she gave me 3 very key pieces of advice. The first one was, when you go to bed and you're standing in front of the mirror and you're brushing your teeth, make sure you can look yourself in the eye and know that you've done the best you can do with what you've got that day. Fantastic advice. Not always completely achievable, I'll be honest. There are days when my eyes kind of slide away because I'm thinking, oh, I didn't really do absolutely the best I could, but I try. Number 2 was treat everybody according to what they need, which of course doesn't mean treating everybody the same. It also doesn't always mean treating everybody how they like to be treated. Sometimes it's about giving people quite difficult messages and constructive feedback. But if you have to do that, then do what I call, excuse my language, a poo sandwich. So you start off with some good news and then you give them the bad news, but you always end with some good news. So the poo sandwich kind of makes it easier for people to take that constructive feedback, because there's great things about everybody, but sometimes you just need to pull people back, rein them in a little bit on things that aren't going quite so well. So that's that. And the third piece of advice that my mum gave me is never shave your legs. Fantastic advice. I took it. I've never had to shave my legs. So anybody out there who hasn't started yet, don't. It'll pay dividends in the end. Other bits of advice from me are laugh. Just enjoy what you do. Make sure that you are doing what you love, and if you're not loving it, for goodness sake, you've got one life, live it. So get out there and do something that you do want to do. Don't be scared of life. You know, my husband having cancer, as I said, it changed my perspective on everything in the world, and if I was not happy, I would do something about it. Don't get hung up with ego. You know, chief execs, you know, sort of, oh yeah, here she is, a chief exec sat there telling us all this stuff. Actually, I felt like being sick just before I came on here. We're only human after all, as the song goes. You know, that's who we are. Always close the loop. Always, always, always close the loop. Don't ever leave somebody hanging. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And if you ask people, like through that 15 minutes of fame, to give you information and ask you questions, make sure you go back and answer those questions. And I do that relentlessly, and I hope that anybody who works with me would say that. I believe, because it's true, that anybody that works with me would say that I care about them. I care about every single one of my colleagues. It doesn't mean I always like all of them or that they have to always like me, but I do care about them. And I care about all 10,000 of our customers too. Even the customers who sometimes aren't as nice to us as they could be. There are reasons for that, and we always try and dig underneath the surface and find out what's going on. Advice on something to read, just in case you want some. Molly Harvey, Outstanding Leadership. Read it. It's an absolutely excellent book. That was recommended to me by Julie Fadden. And again, it's a real game changer. Another one will be Liam O'Connell, who used to be my coach. He wrote a fantastic book called Don't Feed the Ducks. And that book, it's all about who to keep away from, I guess, is the best way to put it. But fantastic advice. I know it's a bit old hat these days, but Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was a real changer for me in my early 20s, and it's always sat alongside me. And out of all of the 7 habits, sharpening the saw, looking after yourself, is absolutely the most important, because you burn out, you're no good to anybody, are you? And then a film to watch, because this film, again, was an absolute game changer for me, is 12 Angry Men. It is a brilliant, brilliant portrayal of how to influence and negotiate with people. So there you go. Those are my little bits of advice. I think I've covered pretty well everything. I'll take some questions in a minute. One last thing is, I was on Twitter last night, because I'm always on Twitter, and there was a guy on there, a doctor, who'd been talking to his terminally ill patients who were all children. Bit of a tearjerker here, so mascara warning to the ladies there. And what these children told him was that it's not about the clothes that they were never going to get to wear. It wasn't about the Facebook stuff they were never going to do. It wasn't even about Twitter or Instagram. But the conclusion he came to from listening to all these kids was be kind, read books, spend time with your family, crack jokes, I'm well known for that one, go to the beach, hug your dog, cat, whatever, tell that special person that you love them. And if I could leave you with one piece of advice, it would be nothing to do with housing. It would be do that, because those kids know they're not going to be long on this earth, and that's what they think. It's what I think too, so I commend it to you. And happy now if anybody does happen to have any questions, because I've yacked on for far too long, as I knew I would as soon as I got started. So anything anybody wants to know, go for it. I've got lots of hellos and oh yes and that sort of thing, but no questions as yet. Anything happening? No, nobody wants to ask me any questions. Oh crikey, I'm going to have to think of more things to talk about then, aren't I? When I was talking about the fact that my career path has been a little bit different to lots of people's, because I've gone up, down and sideways. Hi. Up, down and sideways. I started as a repair clerk, as I say, and then I moved up. But then when things have interested me, or I've felt I can make a difference, I have moved sideways, I have moved down. So never be scared of that. It's never affected me to do that. I've never had somebody go, well, why did you take a backward step? You know, it's always been seen as a real positive, because I love what I do, and I think it shines from you if you do, really. What's the big challenge? Well, it depends what you mean by the big challenge. The big challenge is getting through this just at this moment. But in terms of my organisation, we're an arm's length management organisation. And so we manage council housing on behalf of Sedgemoor District Council, who are our parent organisation. So I guess the big challenge for me is to try to second guess what government policy is going to be going forward, whether there is going to be a huge rise in council house building, whether money is going to be made available, whether, you know, the promises around the end of the rent cut are really going to happen, or whether there's going to be a change of government. I mean, the big challenges are all quite political, I would say. Eat lots of ice cream. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of ice cream. I'm a savoury girl. And now, of course, it's February. I'm back on the gin and the wine, if I'm honest. But there we go. The biggest learning when I went in and everyone had gone. Thank you, Stephanie. I think it was take a breath, because when it happened and I phoned my husband, I say it was my 3rd day, and I phoned him to tell him what had happened, and he said, get in the car, come home, you've never been there, don't grind yourself into the ground over something. And then about 30 seconds later, I won't tell you exactly the word he used, but if I say, he said, oh poo, you've gone quiet, you never go quiet, as you're probably gathering. And I said, I've met the people. The people here are just fantastic. And they're what kept me here, and they're what keep me here now. You know, there are other options and possibilities out there, I suppose, but I don't want to leave here. It's a fantastic place to work. And in terms of learning, anything's possible. I came here as Director of Neighbourhoods. Within a few weeks, I've been made Managing Director. And then last September, the board asked me to become their chief executive, which, you know, how proud am I? It's fantastic, isn't it? Really good. Oh, have I scrolled down, Jen? Oh, no, I haven't. Am I supposed to scroll down? There you go. Hello, Fizz. I work with an ALMO. How is the relationship with the local authority? And how do you overcome different points of view and approaches? That's a really difficult question to answer, really, because the relationship, as with any organisation, with any ALMO, is up and down, to be honest, because we don't always see entirely eye to eye about where the money should be. And so I suppose the relationship isn't always as easy as it could be, but, you know, we make it work, because if you don't make it work, you haven't got an organisation, have you? So you have to find the common ground. And whenever I have difficulties with people, the phrase I always think of is that before you can walk in another person's shoes, you must first remove your own. So if somebody's got a different point of view to me, I try, it doesn't always work, but I try to look at things from their point of view, because that way you can sometimes get under their skin and get a little bit of leverage, let's be honest. Jill, hiya Jill. What are your thoughts on how we can all play a role in encouraging more younger entrants into our great profession? Well, goodness me, I think the first thing we can do is more things like this. I mean, I'm really enjoying it now, and I've only got about 4 minutes left. I didn't want to do it, but here we are. So lots of things like this. I've gone and done lectures at universities, but that's been where people are already engaged in the profession. So one of the things that we do here is we try to engage with the schools, so that we're actually talking to people, and Prince's Trust and organisations like that. So we're actually going out and telling people about housing. Our apprentices are always amazed at how many different jobs there are within housing. So we do need to get better at getting out there and telling people about it. Previous organisations I've worked at, we've mentored within schools. And I think that's another way of getting out there, so that those children who are the young people who are perhaps not quite attaining the grades that the school think they can, you can go along and support them, and that's always a good selling opportunity. Hi Jen. Hi Ross. Hello. We want to hear more. Oh, well, I think we're probably going to have to go quite soon. So here's an offer. And CIH will tell me off for this, because I'm not actually on the CIH register for mentoring and coaching. But I've actually got a gap, because I'm not coaching or mentoring anybody at the moment particularly. So if anybody out there is looking for a mentor or coach and thinks that anything I've said is interesting, or there's anything more that I can do for you, please do get in touch. I always come back to people who contact me. Maybe not immediately, but I always come back. Ross, how can we maximise the knowledge and experience of senior figures to succession plan, i.e. mentoring, etc.? Think more that goes on should be public. Absolutely, and I think I've just made the offer about mentoring, Ross, so, and you know where I am anyway, because you do call me. Maybe we can go on and visit and chat more. Absolutely, Seth, you'd be very, very welcome. Just DM me on Twitter at Jazzbar, and I'd be absolutely delighted to talk more. Jen is a fab mentor. Blimey, who's saying that? Oh, Cheryl, thank you. That's really kind of you. Yeah, you won me, didn't you, as part of your Rising Star Prize, which was rather marvellous. And we had a fantastic time. And Cheryl, who convinced me to do this, of course, it is now, I would say, a good friend. So there we are. Oh dear, Jill's getting cross with me now. Tut tut, because I'm not registered for the CIH. I just don't get time, Jill, I'll be honest. I need somebody to physically press the buttons for me. Every minute of every day is so completely full. But yeah, I think we're awfully close to me having to say goodbye. So get registered, Jen. Yes, Jill, I will get registered. But the offer's still there to anybody who wants to have a chat, because we do some really fab stuff here. So I suppose I better say goodbye to everybody now. Okay, Jill, thank you for that. I better say goodbye now. Thank you ever so much. It's been an absolute delight talking to myself on a screen, but answering your questions. I hope I've answered everybody's questions. If I haven't, as I say, just get in touch and give me a shout, and I'll be back in touch. Thank you. Bye. Bye, bye, bye.